Hello, and this is the second half of the Kids TV Spectrum Games compilation. So if you haven't seen the first one, it's fine, you can watch it later. You know, they're only in A to Z order. It doesn't matter if you watch P to Z. It's not like some sort of serial, so it doesn't really matter. But anyway, here's the rest of it right now. There'll be a link to the other one somewhere. Here's 2 hours of me waffling on and telling crap jokes.
Come in, children, settle down. Thomas, stop hitting Abdul with your ruler, you big old racist. Anna, no, your pencil does not go in Gabriella's vagina. Settle down, settle down. It's time for class. And today we're going to be taught by our supply teacher, who just so happens to be an irritating wooden bird. Why? Do shut up, you silly little chirper! Playdays, formerly known as Playbus, lasted from 1988 until 1997 on the BBC's preschool television. It had to change its name as there was a charity called Playbus, and therefore, to not confuse the matter, the BBC politely changed the name of their television show. It was the follow-up to Play School, a show you might remember if you're a little bit older like I am. A show which featured a horrible beanbag that just sat motionless as a main character. Move, you shit. There were early appearances in Playbus by future children's TV superstars like Zoe Ball and Dave Benson Phillips. Alright, I may be exaggerating with Dave Benson Phillips being a superstar, but he was in that show with all the slime in it. Slime, very 90s thing, very good. I think he's a superstar of about 1996 if you ask me. And what would happen in the show would be that the aforementioned Play Bus would stop at different spots each weekday, with the Welsh Inquisitive Avian that I previously mentioned being Monday's episode. That's the Y-Bird stop. The Playground stop being on Tuesday. The Dot stop being Wednesday. Dot was just like a doll that didn't do anything, much like that beanbag from Play School, of course. And that was sort of the format of the show, which was a very popular educational programme indeed. It was indeed the educational programme of choice for early millennial toddlers, before it went all bloody weird and trippy with stuff like Teletubbies and In the Night Garden. Have you ever seen them? They make absolutely no sense at all. No wonder teens and people in their early 20s are so bloody odd. Friendly Learning, well, they were the edutainment arm of alternative software. They were a bit of a experiment by the 8 and 16-bit computer licensing juggernaut to glean some more cash out of their acquired famous properties. On the Spectrum, we had games based on Thomas the Tank Engine, Sooty Sweep, and then this, Playdays. But unlike the other franchises mentioned, Playdays didn't even try and have a fun non-educational game on the main alternative label. You will sit there and you will learn, Playdays watching person, and you will enjoy every moment of it. Learn. There are 13 games for your would-be child or early 40s regressed fool to experience, and the Y-Bird is a omnipresent feature throughout all, helping and judging you during the baker's dozen of brain-building activities. She doesn't shit on your confidence at any point, and at one point she starts getting all horny about you, which is okay if you're an adult, but don't say that children are hot. From shape recognition to dots to basic maths, Playdays offers quite a wide range of things to do for your potentially still pooing their pants ankle biters. There are 4 levels of difficulty, and I know my place because I chose level 2. I'm not that dumb. To prove I'm not that dumb, I had Wobble, the celebratory legless clown, waddle onto the screen multiple times to tell me how smart I am. Look! That shamble on his hip bones must have really hurt, so I'm chuffed that he thinks I'm this incredibly clever. That poor fella is disabled. What a nice guy. The controls have you either moving the cursor keys to select the letters or a Kempston interfaced joystick, which is nice and simple for your target 3 to 8 year olds. Note that the term rub out means delete as opposed to having a wank. There are no clips of the Wirebirds in a bra or any little snuck-in bits from Sam Fox's strip poker. If you wish to punish your unit, remember you're doing it at a game aimed at 3 to 8-year-olds, you sick flipper. And I don't care how excited you get about spelling the word jumper correctly. As with all these education games based on TV shows, it's very hard for me to get particularly enthused by these titles. But where does this rank with the other games such as Mr. Men, Paddington, Shoe People and Sooty? Well, it is better than most in terms of its presentation, but then it did come out just as the Spectrum was about to pop its clogs in a commercial sense in 1993, compared to some of the others which came out in the early to mid-1980s. There's not a lot more to say about an educational game like this, really. You do get a decent representation of the musical theme, I suppose. Yet another earworm, so it is. Every time I do an episode based on TV shows, I usually have the theme stuck in my head, and this is no different. In fact, I think it's one of the worst ones for it. Your Sinclair were the only magazine to review the Spectrum version of Playdays, and that's because they had a demo of it on the front of their magazine. The review, which was in their issue 89, which came out in May 1993, said basically they preferred Shoe People. They said that you shouldn't buy this if you're only going to buy one educational title. They say it is decent, but no award winner, and they gave it a 65%. Postman Pat. Postman Pat. Postman Pat has a very small village run, but somehow has sequestered a helicopter to do his round, is continually recovering errors that he made himself, and is easily distracted from his actual bloody job. It doesn't scan, but it's cold, hard truth. Yet this useless numpty somehow managed to get four ZX Spectrum games. 4. I'll tell you this for nout, lad. We reward mediocrity in this country, Bayek. Postman Pat was created by John Cunliffe, the writer also behind Rosie and Jim, and it was directed by legendary animator Ivor Wood, who also worked on stop-motion classics like The Herbs, The Magic Roundabout, The Wombles and Paddington, some of which have had Spectrum games, yes. Its initial run was a substantial hit for a good 15 years, running from 1981 to 1996, and was a huge success, with people fresh from the womb, with that CBBC animation fame converting to vast toy and merchandising sales. CGI movies and series followed, with the latest episode still being made as late as 2017. The plot, for what it is, follows a friendly village post person called Mr. Patrick Clifton, as he, along with his pussy Jess, delivers letters and packages to the folk of Greendale. That's the idea, but usually it ends up with him being roped into solving a problem for one of the needy types in the local village. The dude just can't say no. It's a nice trait, he's a nice bloke, but I've been waiting in for that fleshlight modelled on the vaginal lips of Vera Duckworth all day, Patrick, and I do not accept that you've had to go and retrieve that kite for that kid. Get that thing to me now, son. But before we get to Alternative's Postman Pat Trilogy, let's surmise that the existence of a Postman Pat implies the existence of a pre-Man Pat. And indeed, this is the case here, as Longman Software put out a Postman Pat game a lot earlier than the others in the space year of 1984. 1984. No sex crimes. Longman Software were behind the original SuperTed game that looked like one basic bitch, but it played pretty well. And this also looks like a basic bitch. It doesn't play that well, though. Pat has to pursue various characters around Greendale in his van by following the trail of tyre or footprints left upon the road. I'm not sure if Greendale has recently had some new tarmac put in, but those tracks are very visible. The game is entirely at random in terms of where the characters end up, so even on the highest difficulty level, they could be just around the corner from the starting point of your post office. It's my understanding that the difficulty is attributed to how irritating the cattle that wander into the roads are going to be, as they can just sit there being udder having gits for minutes, forcing you to either find another route or just wait. Yes, the gameplay at times requires you at points to just stare at the screen and do nothing. Literally nothing. Animation is non-existent, with the van just chugging framelessly around a top-down, yet very populous with animals, Greendale. It's not particularly good, this, and probably worth giving a miss. Crash and Sinclair User both ran educational game sections with this game in, but they didn't give it a score. But I genuinely can't see the educational worth of Postman Pat's trial game. Are we trying to teach our kids just to stare at cattle for hours? Very peculiar. The first Postman Pat game by Alternative is, as the fabulous Super Jimtendo channel pointed out a few weeks ago, Grand Theft Auto Greendale. Please subscribe to this man's channel via the link at the end. Mrs. Goggins at the post office gives young Patrick his task, and off he trundles in his jaunty little van that seems to have some suspension issues looking at that animation. Reach an objective, and the perspective alters from the isometric view of Greendale to a side-on view as Pat discusses his task with the various needy denizens of this small hamlet. He can ping letters out of the side of his van, rather than get out and put them into the postbox personally, and if he misses, he has to go out and get them. Quite frankly, that's what he should do. What a lazy git. What I say he's lazy is once again just sort of roped in by someone or other to do something completely unrelated to his day job. You'll need to avoid hazards like spilled oil and bicycles, and wrestle with the sometimes baffling controls that will have Pat, which will invariably leave poor old Pat careening around this small village with its tiny little roads in reverse most of the time, because honestly, it's much easier to do it that way some of the time. Woe betide any daft driver who ends up getting the post van stuck sideways on one of the small bridges though. You're going to be there for a while. You know that bit in Austin Powers? That. The tasks will continue, usually repeating until the time expires and Pat's day is done. Also, if you fancy it, you can cross dimensions into the nonsense verse by going down to the bottom corner and driving past this tractor. Look at that! Postman Pat 1 is a perfectly adequate budget game for the late 80s 6-year-old, very reminiscent of the later Fireman Sam game reviewed a few years ago. Crash said that it's a fun game for a while, but once you've completed all the tasks, the novelty soon wears off. They gave it a 62% in their January 1990 issue. Your Sinclair weren't a fan at all. They said of it in their issue 60 that if you buy it for your kids, they'll never speak to you again. They gave it a lowly 49%. And well, I suppose it's a good way to get rid of unwanted children. Postman Pat 2 sees the delivery man temporarily stripped of his van and told to deliver the mail on foot, as hot weather has made the boxy vehicle briefly cough its last. So Pat has to trudge around in his full uniform, posting letters through doors as he rapidly dehydrates. Luckily, this can be combated via drinking tea, which will be given to Pat by the various good citizens of Greendale in exchange for returning an object to them. The local clergyman here has lost his torch, and by Christ the lazy so-and-so, he's merely dropped it a screen away. Could you not see that from where you stood? Arrows point your way to the next delivery door, which Pat foolishly doesn't and can't do in sequential order, meaning that he will have to deliver a letter on one side of the map before walking across the entire village to post a letter, and then come back to deliver a letter to the original address's neighbour. No wonder the Fabio Capello lookalike is so utterly pooped. Sam will occasionally appear to offer Pat a lift to his next address, and Ted Glenn will creepily stalk Pat, offering to fix things for him. He's married, Ted. Stop following him, you creepy Hitler-tash dickhead. Chickens will, for some reason, decide to snatch letters from Pat's bag and randomly dump them all over the place. And overall, there's some solid ideas here. There is an occasional glitch where Pat will refuse to post a letter through a door, but once again it's an adequate budget-priced piece of distracting software for another younger Spectrum user. It's graphically okay, controls are okay, and it plays, well, just about okay. Your Sinclair were the only periodical to review Postman Pat 2 and gave it a 48% in their February 1990 issue, saying that the game seems a bit on the boring side. Correction, a lot on the boring side. They're not Postman Pat fans. Postman Pat 3, aka Postman Pat to the Rescue, is the final part of Alternative's trilogy, a piece of software that completes the Postman Pat collection that Alternative would release in 1993. Pat's friend in the nearby city of Pencaster has gone and broken his leg, and he can't deliver the large numbers of phone directories. Yeah, phone directories, remember them? He needs to get them to the houses in that large urban area. So Pat agrees to help the city strongman with the equipment they need to rip in half to make themselves look all badass and cool in front of the women folk and Channel 5 audience cameras. While it's nice of him to help again, of course, Pat seems to be in a bit of a hurry, as he's half-heartedly doing the job by driving dangerously down the middle of the road and hurling the yellow pages out of the window of his van. A letter in a village was bad enough, Patrick, but these things are pretty heavy and the population is more dense, and you're going to kill someone, mate. Especially considering the city is full of buffoons driving equally badly. Yes, we're in a top-down variant of Paperboy here, which has taken a noticeable drop in graphics, concept and effort from the other games in the series. Cars and vans will not leave you with much time to avoid or react to them, and it's a slow, dull and turgid experience that made me feel very sad. It's without a doubt the worst game that I've played in this collection, and probably one of the worst games I've played in the entire series. Your Sinclair reviewed it as part of their look at the collection, and well, they said it's marginally more enjoyable than trying to cut down the largest tree in the forest with a herring, and they gave it a 20% in their issue 87. So a poor effort to finish from Pat in an overall mildly average series of games. As fun as being a postman in a road full of starved Dobermans. Hey, Rep fans! Yeah! God, Roland had an irritating voice, didn't he? I mean, if he was a guy in the bar, you'd avoid him, wouldn't you? I mean, he's probably the sort of guy who eats Frey bento pies and talks about trains and fills socks up with semen over pictures of Letitia Dean. I can't stand him. And yes, I have got an annoying voice myself, so I'm absolutely qualified to say this. Anyway, puppets. We've already had a few puppets so far on this channel, namely Ed the Duck being one. There's the link to his video that I made just above there, and Gilbert the Alien being another. There's the link to his video up there if the Ed the Duck one's disappeared, and Terry McGann, there's a link to his video, him from Minder being the last, because you know what, Dennis Waterman is actually made out of felt. Did you know that though? Roland Rat was the first, I remember, co-hosting children's television, and was indeed the catalyst for the kids' TV puppet presenter gig in the UK television scene of the 1980s. That would give us the aforementioned Ed and Gilbert, along with Gordon the Gopher, Nobby the Sheep and others that did certainly exist, but I'm not going to mention them here because I'm the wrong side of bloody lazy. The reason that there were so many puppets on UK TV was because of Roland. Because for a time he was massively popular. His introduction was credited as saving the ailing TV AM show on ITV, which, if you don't remember, was the Good Morning Britain of its time. Though, of course, we know that the puppet on that show says controversial contrarian things for money and hacks the phones of dead schoolgirls. Who says modern TV is less edgy?
So yes, Roland Rat was on TV AM between 1983 and 1985, the saviour of ITV's morning television content, with multiple hours of the show handed over to him for half-term mini-serials and little presenting gigs of cartoons. He would have multiple exorable chart singles, merchandise, foodstuffs, clothing, and he would even earned himself a transfer to the BBC for a 6-year stint that involved him hosting various chat shows and quiz shows. He's wheeled out still on the odd TV show as a sort of nostalgic attraction. His success is down to the creative genius of Dave Claridge, who manufactured, operated and voiced Roland. The brash and overly confident Roland is aided by other small mammals such as Welsh boffin Errol the hamster and the dim-witted sycophant Kevin the gerbil, and they all hang out in Rat Cave 1, which is under King's Cross Station. It is Rat Cave 1 that provides the initial setting for Ocean's Roland's Rat Race, that was released at the Back of the Vermin's TV AM run in 1985 for the Commodore 64 and the ZX Spectrum. Programmed by Ocean regulars Denton Designs, Roland's Rat Race is a flip-screen adventure putting you in the leather hat of the titular plague carrier. The storyline is that Roland is late for his stint at the TVEM studio and so has to rush to the studio so his segment isn't replaced. Some complete numbnuts has broken his door and scattered the pieces around, which will probably give him that sort of early morning panicky angst that we all feel when we can't find our keys. I bet he's feeling ratty. I'm sorry. Roland is prevented from doing his hodgepodge portal temporal DIY by a fudge ton of sentient Wellington boots. Or is that a gang of ghosts' insensible footwear for a sewer adventure? Do ghosts actually have to worry about getting human excrement on them? I don't know. Do they have mums that complain about it? And does this mean that they're naked apart from these shoes? And as we all know, everyone looks far more nakeder when they're wearing shoes and nothing else than if they're wearing nothing at all. At least I think that anyway. But you might have your own judgment on that. But as you can see nothing at all on these ghosts apart from the Wellingtons, I'm not sure that my made-up law applies here. All I know is that they're here to eviscerate Britain's most famous 20th century rodent puppet icon. You can stop their ill intent by firing a load of horsebone juice over them using your patented long-range glue cannon. This sticks them fast and allows Roland to pass them unscathed, but beware, the glue gun only has limited ammo. This can be topped up with little pots of PVA that have been left lying around the sewer alleys. You can also replenish Roland's health by eating food that can be found not on a plate, on the sewer floor. And I guess just like we had to have a word with that prisoner in Nightmare, we have to have a word with Roland about hygiene. Don't eat food you find on the floor of a sewer, kids. You probably will die. Graphically, Roland's Rat Race does a reasonable job, though there is less variety here than in the cereal aisle of Tesco during the coronavirus. That is a joke about the breakfast cereal variety packs.
Do you see? Variety breakfast cereal. Oh God.
You've got multiple sewer tunnels that look very samey, but then sewers aren't that known for multiple decors because, you know, what, they're designed just for getting your rump logs from A to Z, and maybe I shouldn't expect too much of them. The lack of variety in the sewer tunnel makes the game very hard to navigate around though, so you may need to draw or have access to a map.
Roland, well, he looks fairly recognisable, and that's a huge plus for any game from this era. Yes, he does look like Roland Rat, although he doesn't look half as annoying. Plus, if you look at the top of the screen, there is some window dressing in the form of traffic, and you know what, sometimes a dude rides past on a C5, and you've got to respect the use of a C5 on a Spectrum game. I'm pretty sure that is the law. Control, well, there's no jump to clear the wellies, and it's a bugger to get upstairs or downstairs in a similar way that it was to preambulate betwixt floors using stairs in Denton's game based on the Transformers. There is a link to that. Boy, I'm getting happy with the links. Have I got enough links left? Probably not. The flip screen movement can sometimes flip the controls, and this tends to happen every time you go through one of the tunnels that litter the environment. It plays all right, you know, it's very simple in its design, and it's okay. It's sort of like a low budget, no jump button Dan Dare, and I quite like Dan Dare. After a run of really rather ropey TV Spectrum games, it's pleasant to play something inoffensively above average. Your Sinclair, or Your Spectrum as it was known when Miner Willie was a boy, enjoyed it, giving Roland's Rat Race 8 out of 10. They recommend you make a map, which they're right, and they state that if you're a Roland Rat fan, then this is a must. Are there any of them left? I hope not. Sinclair user, they stuck our Roland on the front cover even, and they gave his game a 4-star review, saying in the final analysis that Roland's Rat Race was good fun. Yes. Crash felt that Ocean got it all wrong though, and they thought it was nothing special, and they gave it a 66%, and well, that's fair enough.
Comics! No, not this man, nor this fella, nor this lady, but this sort of thing. Yes, the British comic, a comic such as the Beano or the Dandy. They were huge business at one time, as much of a news agency treat for a 5-year-old as a Mars bar or an ice cream or a 2-litre bottle of White Lightning cider. What? What? Are you telling me I can't raise my kids? The Beano and the Dandy weren't like your Spider-Manses or your Batmanses. They were like the funnies from the newspaper, which is a word no one outside of the 1930 New York scene has ever used. Crucially, I've always wondered this. Did anyone at all actually ever laugh at Desperate Dan or Dennis the Menace? Really? I mean, they were sort of mildly amusing when you read them, but they weren't actually funny. Maybe that's just me. Regardless, Round the Bend self-styled itself as a comic like the Beano, but in video form, as it was actually a television programme on ITV1. So yes, it was like one of those comics, only it was run by rats and crocodiles. Round the Bend was a satirical children's ITV show written by the creators of Oink. A somewhat more controversial take, Round the Bend featured a grumpy reptilian host in Doc Croc, who ran the show from a sewer along with his 3 assistant rats, posh Jemima Wellington Green, resident comic vaudeville Vince Vermin, and Italian artist Lucetti Bruschetti, otherwise known as Lou Brush. They were rendered in latex by the Spitting Image team, which is pretty obvious when you look at the Australian mounted heads in the background. The team acted as links between various cartoon spoofs and musical parodies of well-known performers, almost always with a scatological bent. He-Man and the Masters of the Universe became Wee-Man and the Masters of the Looniverse. Thundercats became Thunderpants, not to be confused with the Rupert Grint movie, of course. And Kylie Minogue and Jason Donovan became Kylie Manure and Jason Dungovan. Yes, that was the level of comedy involved. All absolutely puerile, but obviously hysterical for those aged 11 and down in 1989.
Round the Bend, a hat-trick production, would go on to have 3 series for Yorkshire Television before ending in 1991. It also had a computer game, which is good, otherwise I would have lulled you here under false pretences like that man who claimed he had puppies in his van when I was a child. Round the Bend was developed by Wiseman Productions for Impulse and released on the Spectrum, Atari ST, Amiga and Commodore 64 in 1991. The story is that Doc Croc has made a bit of a faux pas and blown up the printing press, and all the resulting debris has been flung across the gang's sewer home. And, with the deadline approaching, it is a race against time to collect the various mechanical bits and bobs and get the comic ready for distribution. Not only has the press gone up the Swanee, or I guess down the Swanee, seeing as we're in the sewer, and that was an attempt at comedy, which I won't repeat, but also the latest issue of the comic has been blown to high heaven. What a ruddy farce, old boy. Good grief, sort it out, Doc Croc. You can select any of the 4 main characters from the show as they bound about the slimy turd tunnels, collecting all the various parts of the machine whilst avoiding bats, barrels, slime and teddy bears. The teddies were a glowering menace to the team in the TV show. Should you stumble across a comic page, you can enter it, and you have to move through each panel, avoiding whatever character is depicted in the page to reach the final box and therefore then add it to the collection. Look at it there, like a low budget early proto Comic Zone from the Mega Drive, only incredibly frustrating and slow. Yes indeed, Doc Croc and his staff amble around the various environments with all the grace of a morbidly obese slug. Most of the level is just a sewer. Obviously you do get these little comic strip bits, so it's a bit dull to look at. Some of the enemies are right buggers. The bats, for instance, are the Spectrum equivalent of the Medusa heads in Castlevania, with the added annoyance of one-hit deaths if they get you. There's also a real budgety feel and look to the game. It reminds me quite a bit of those $1.99 alternative Hanna-Barbera games such as Rough and Ready and Yogi Bear, only this game was full price at the time of its release. Overall then, Round the Bend is a disappointing adaptation of a loved at the time but now largely forgotten edgy kids show. Round the Bend scored a generous 74% in the January 1992 edition of Your Sinclair, and I'm With These Guys 48% in Sinclair User the very same month. Just going back very briefly to British comics before I go away and leave you to an evening probably much improved. Have you ever thought about the artist who drew Gnasher, the dog owned by Dennis the Menace? Did Gnasher's artist ever actually see a dog in real life? I mean, what the fudge knuckle is that bald-faced thing with shaved legs and bear ears? That is no dog I've ever seen. What lunacy. Rupert Bear. He's a weird one, is our Rupert, isn't he? He's been around forever, 100 years this November actually, and, well, he's had 4 separate television series about him, a well-known short film made by one of the world's most famous living musicians, and these 2 games that we're covering here today. With that said, does anyone actually care? Have you ever met a hardcore Rupert Bear fan? Has anyone seen anyone wearing a Rupert Bear t-shirt? Do they even exist? You know, he's as enduring as Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny, but have you ever met anyone that really cares about Rupert? Has he ever had a theme park? He just sort of exists perpetually unworshipped, like Blue Peter or Sooty, remaining in the pan-generational consciousness because of Grans buying annuals and books for their offspring's offspring, because they love Rupert Bear. Or because they think he must still be hip because he's still in the Daily Express after all these years. And we all know that kids love stories about illegal immigrants, Snowmageddons, Diana death conspiracies and the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, don't we? But Rupert Bear, eh? Rupert Bear. Rupert Bear was created by artist Mary Tortel and made his debut on the 8th of November 1920 in the Daily Express. At around 1935, children's illustrator Alfred Bestel took over the writing and artwork for Rupert, and his is the best known stint given its longevity, as Bestel continued to work on the Rupert stories well into his 90s. An annual of Rupert's adventures has been released every single year since 1936, right through World War II, which is certainly more than you can say for Masters of the Universe. Skeletor.
Yes, you all!
The first series was a puppet-led show which featured a theme song which used the lyric Rupert the Bear, which is apparently wrong. You see, Rupert has never officially had the definitive article in his name, that being the word the. I've always called him Rupert the Bear, and I'm happy to be proved wrong. And mind you, I'd be offended if I met a clothed polar bear and it called me Jay's man-child the human. Also, I'd be confused and scared if I was having a conversation with a clothed polar bear. But you know what? 2020's been pretty weird so far. Keep it going. The next adaptation to the screen was the one most of us know, the Paul McCartney fronted Rupert and the Frog song, which featured We All Stand Together, Boom, 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 Aye. Sorry about the earworm that's going to be with you for the rest of the week. The second series, around the times of the games we're covering today, lasted from 1985 to 1988, and they were a series of short still illustrations with voiceover over the top, and they're certainly the ones I remember the most. They were the ones that had the song Rupert, you're a wonderful bear, and indeed they went on to show how wonderful Rupert was with his series of adventures and him being a jolly nice bloke. The next series to appear on the small screen was an international collab between animation studios in Britain, France and Canada, and is an animation that clearly had much more money thrown at it than the previous two. Look how swish it is. That series lasted from 1991 to 1997. The final show so far is Rupert Bear Follow the Magic, a stop-motion animated effort broadcast on Channel 5 from 2006 to 2008. It covered a lot of the Bestel stories, though I would imagine they left alone the 1960 story, Rupert and the Diamond Leaf, where Rupert went to an island and met a race of people called the Little Coons. Yes. Ouch. And that is the very truncated history of Britain's most enduring bear. Look at him in his ridiculous trousers. Around the time of the release of the Frog song, Quicksilver, who also released the previously covered Thompson Twins Adventure and Max Headroom games, acquired the Rupert Bear license from the Daily Express Group and put out two games in quick succession, starting with Rupert and the Toy Makers Party for the Commodore 64 and ZX Spectrum in June 1985. It's worth prefacing this with the Commodore 64 one coming out first, and it is pretty commonplace that the belief is that the Commodore 64 one is the better version of that game. Here's the loading screen for it, with Rupert expectorating all over that celebratory cake, the white-furred scallywag shite bag. The plot is that the polar bear Stid is running late for his friend's birthday, so he decides to take a shortcut through the evil toy maker's castle. Rupert, mate, walk around the castle. There's less hassle. And another thing, since when have toy makers owned castles? Isn't that a king thing to own, or at least a duke? Maybe some sort of warlock, but a toy maker? So yes, Rupert has got himself in the shtuck with his poor life decisions, and now must traverse 7 stages through the castle's fiendish interior, which each consist of 3 screens, 3 levels high, and he's trying his damnedest to evade all sorts of killer toy machinations. This toy maker has somehow made that much money to buy a castle despite his creations attempting to kill children. Surely the amount of lawsuits alone should make the game one level and one room high, as Rupert must make his way through a grubby bedsit of this heavily sued toy maker. Rupert must collect about 10 invites per stage in order to open up the door to the next level. Why does he need 70 invites to attend a party? Is he collecting them for all his pals? Because, you know what, 70 people for a kid's party is some turnout, to be fair. I presume the toy maker is jealous of all the merriment and has taken all the invites. Why? I don't know. Dude, it's a kid's party. You're probably not wanted there, especially as you're the murder toy guy. And besides, it'll be rubbish. There won't be any drugs or alcohol, and the only adults there will be sober parents. Sit this one out, mate. You've even called it your party according to the title screen and the front cover of the box. It's not your party. You're being kind of a knob about this, toy maker. It's no wonder you don't get invited to stuff. Rupert and the Toy Maker's Party isn't a great game. Rupert controls poorly, making giant leaps forward. Enemies are pretty easy to avoid still, and there's plenty of furniture to hide on should a soldier march past. But the real struggle here is traversing ladders and stairs. It's horrible. Unlike the simple stair traversal of a Jet Set Willy say, Rupert requires you to jump in a highly specific manner to stand any chance of making it up a set of steps. Most jumps will see you fly straight through the stairs into the path of an enemy. And with just 5 lives on offer, it won't be long before Rupert just pieces out and walks home. I'm presuming the reason he does this is because the Daily Express didn't want a depiction of Rupert's twitching corpse being ground into a paste underneath the wheels of a toy train. By the way, his altercations with death are described as tumbles, like what poor old dears do in care homes. Graphically, the Rupert sprite is decent enough, though is an absolute hoe to a tribute clash, and the castle environs are best described as green. Very, very green. Maybe the sprite stood out better on this screen. Plus, the graphics are afflicted by the fact that it's a bit of a flickery bugger, to say the least. Sound is simple bleeps and blops, and overall Rupert and the Toy Maker's Party is pretty poor fare. Reviews are mixed. A 7 out of 10 came out of CVG, but this seems to be an editorial error, as the score box out has the same scores as the Ice Palace review of the Commodore 64 game on the same page, but a much worse review. They say, looking at the game, you realise that some games are destined for just one machine. I'm afraid to say Rupert is one of them. They had reviewed Toy Maker's Party on the Commodore 64 a few months before and given it an 8 out of 10. Crash gave Toy Maker's Party a 54%, saying overall it is an average game that may appeal to fans of Rupert paraphernalia. Who are they? But it is nothing stunning in its own right. Another editorial error seems to feature in Sinclair User, as they give the game a 4 out of 5 but state that the game is a disappointment. Your Spectrum, the precursor to Your Sinclair, gave it a 4 out of 10. The most scathing review of all, arguing that they would prefer to get a copy of the annual in their Christmas stocking. Nah, you wouldn't. They're a bit rubbish. So overall, Rupert and the Toy Maker's Party took a critical bashing. But what of Rupert and the Ice Castle, released just a year later by Quicksilver's sister publisher, Bug Bite Software? Poor Rupert, he doesn't have a lot of luck with castles, does he? He won't be renewing his National Trust membership after all this, I presume. His pals have gone and gotten themselves frozen by the dastardly Jack and Jenny Frost, and it's up to Rupert, the only one with the foresight to wear a warm scarf, to get them out of trouble. And when he does that, the silly sods just immediately get recaptured again, and Rupert has to do it all over again. But this time, he's smart enough to grab some warm clothing so it doesn't happen for a third time. So what do we have here? Well, it's a platformer entirely made out of ice levels. Yay! What a treat. I'm sure if a third Rupert game had come out, it would have been just made up of swimming levels or high-speed minecart stages, everyone's favourites. There's ice everywhere, and this will make the check-trousered Ursine skid about like a middle-aged drunk on his way back from Wetherspoons at 2 a.m. on a snowy night in January. Unlike its predecessor, the game is broken into single or double screen stages, with the objective being very clear. Make contact with the one character sprite on the screen that isn't either Rupert or trying to kill Rupert, and you're away. It turns the unfocused gameplay of Toy Maker's Party into more of a platform puzzler, albeit crippled by the same Daily Express awful controls. Some of the jumps can be infuriating when you start out, but give it a few tries and you get used to its idiosyncrasies and you'll be fine-ish. The level design is sometimes a bit ropey, with a smattering of really tricky stages and ill thought out enemy placements that will make you a little bit tetchy, whilst other stages are finishable in the time it takes a quick-witted fly to think about evading a rolled up newspaper. Worse, the game length is so small it's possible to finish the game in about 4 minutes. That is low value for money even for a budget game. Once again, Rupert will just throw a huff and leave his pals to freeze to death in the chilled interiors of the ice castle should he run out of ice pills which stand in for his life. But at least he goes blue like Jim Robinson did when he had a heart attack in Neighbours. Maybe Rupert dies of hypothermia before he gets home. Maybe that's the true tragedy. Still, at least in the title screen, Rupert looks like he's been having a whale at the time, hotboxing himself in a small shed. So at least he died happy. The game cunningly averts the colour clash issues of the first game by placing Rupert in a stark black and white environment, with most of the colour coming from his questionable iconic fashion choices. Sound is still sparsely dire. Crash gave it a 50%, saying that the game had unresponsive controls and they didn't like the game very much despite being Rupert's #1 fan. Really? Sinclair user gave it a nice 4-star review, declaring it an above average levels and ladders game. Not heard that before. Particularly the graphics of Rupert himself. It is too easy though, they stated. They gave it additional praise for being put on the War on Want 13 Pan Company charity compilation tape, along with games like Horace and the Spiders and Hunchback 2, and that was the same month it was released as a singular title. So well done, Bug Bite Software. ZX Computing, a short-lived Spectrum magazine, decided the game qualified for their Grim Rating award, however, saying that it could have been a good addition to the ranks of budget games, but with such a small number of repetitious screens, there's not much here to play. Oh dear. And that is that. Other than the Commodore 64 versions of these same games, there has never been another Rupert Bear game. So it seems at the moment that Rupert's adventures are on pause. Maybe in that time he can come onto this channel, watch some of the videos, like and subscribe, and maybe so should you. And you don't even have to wear questionable checked yellow trousers to do it. Shoe People, a show about sentient shoes. Thank the Lord Jeebus that shoes aren't really sentient. I've forced my feet into many shoes and without their express permission. That's like sexual assault, albeit tinged with practicality of not stubbing my toes or stepping on sharp stones, glass or dog shiz, but that doesn't matter to the shoe, does it? Not only that, but if shoes are sentient, then they are enclosing my disgusting feet. Feet that smell like a Gamorrean guard from Star Wars 3 days after he's gone out on a marathon and not bathed. Shoe People was an animated television show originally shown in the spring of 1987 on the early morning ITV current affairs show TV-AM. A show, of course, that we've covered recently while discussing the computer game based on that rambunctious rodent, Roland Rat. Shoe People was created by James Driscoll, who took his inspiration from noticing that the style and appearance of people's shoes told you about their owners' personalities. I mean, that's his theory. It's not an exact peer-approved science. Just because I wear battered Converse, it doesn't mean I'm a scruffy Arrested Development, middle-aged lose. Right. So anyway, smart-ass James Driscoll wondered what kind of stories these shoes could tell about themselves when they were new and when they were all worn out. Not a lot, James. They're shoes, mate. And this is all a bit overly philosophical for a show aimed at the under-7s. I'm just being a bit bitter because he's called me out quite accurately with my shoes. The story of Shoe People is that there is a shoe repair shop owner who hoards shoes that he cannot repair, possibly because he has deep psychological issues. Maybe he's got a couple of jars of his own poo lying around at home, loads of newspapers stacked up so he can barely enter rooms. When he leaves of an evening, the shoes go all Toy Story and come to life. But also, it makes Shoetown appear in some sort of trans-dimensional warping to an alternative universe ruled by foot coverings. Shoe People, in retrospect, was a little bit odd. The shoes themselves are broadly written, largely characterised by whatever job they have. Charlie is a clown shoe who performs tricks and aims to make people laugh. PC Boot is a boot policeman who is dedicated to law and order. Sergeant Major is a army boot who shouts and generally acts like Windsor Davis from It Ain't Half Hot Mum. You get the idea. The first imported television show to be shown in the former Soviet Union bloc. It became so popular there that they shifted 24 million books based on the Shoe People. Well done them. As a side note, the memorable stuttering theme tune was written and sung by Justin Hayward of the legendary Moody Blues. Shoe People the Game, well, that was an educational title put out by First Class Software, quite late in the Spectrum's life in 1992. First Class were an extremely short-lived educational spin-off label from Gremlin Graphics, with the only other game coming out on the First Class label being Margot's Magical Colouring Book, which didn't even get a separate release, instead appearing on the B-side of the Shoe People game that we're talking about right now. Have you been paying attention? So yes, Shoe People was an educational title with a surprisingly large amount of levels and sub-levels based on the child's development. Each level is a different class type using shapes, colours, words, letters and numbers. We start out with Trampy. Dear Trampy is on a trip to see his mates, who really need to take him to one side and say, look, you need to sort out that massive shotgun wound hole that looks like you could die from it in what passes for whatever this bit of your stomach is. I'm really worried about him. Look at him. He's stopped along the way from seeing his friends by a desperate need to recognise objects and match them. Objects that in universe have fallen off the back of a lorry, because if you're a sentient shoe, how do you operate a lorry effectively? You've got to have a foot on the pedal, but as you are the foot, who's driving? Who's steering the wheel? How does it work? All I'm saying is it's no wonder that he lost most of the stuff off the back of the lorry. You can, if you so wish, swap out object matching in this level with spelling or counting, and as in all levels in this title, you can choose between easy and hard mode. Remember, hard mode in this game is unlikely to be Dark Souls difficult if you're an adult, unless you're a bit thick. On to the next level, and ball-breaking Taskmaster Sergeant Major Boot is bullying a baby into stacking shells because the military, and perhaps a large-scale international shoe war against, I don't know, a Dutch clog army or something, has stripped the Major of his humanity. Or shoemanity. Shoemanity. I made that joke up. It's pretty obvious to tell, isn't it? And if you're wondering now why I've decided to create this fake fan fiction in my head about the horrors of war in this incredibly innocent children's show like the Shoe People, well, why is he a shoe sergeant major? They must have wars if they've got a military, right? Anyway, baby Booty had better match those objects to the correct shelf, or he will be doing 100 push-ups in his own nappy at dusk.
face first. Get all that baby milk poo in your mouth, son. Next up, larceny. Sneaker, who has foolishly dressed himself up as a cartoon thief, a dead giveaway, if ever I did see one, has been apprehended by PC Boot with a bag full of words. Not words that he owns. Sneaker has carelessly smashed up the evidence, and you're tasked with reassembling the words so that PC Boot can frog march the miscreant to the jailhouse. I feel that Sneaker could quite easily evade his would-be captor, what with PC Boot having uselessly short arms. Just look at them. The long arm of the law, not here. From here, we meet Wellington in the next level, a rather dodgy-looking single man dubiously hanging out in a park under the pretense of weighing numbers on a seesaw. I bet he has a hard drive absolutely riddled with toe-curling, horrible, perverted filth. You disgust me, Wellington, you sick, sick boy. Finally, we get a Simon Says style game of sequence memory with Circus Charlie here. The revolver, though, I think seems a little bit ominous, but I assure you that Charlie has little or no intention of turning the gun on himself or the audience, provided he keeps taking his medication that calms him down. After the perplexing short-lived drivel of Orm and Cheap, I'm rather surprised to see the level of effort and polish applied with the Shoe People game. There's tons of different challenges here with 5 per character and 2 skill levels for all of those challenges. There's a lot for small children to do, and the level of diversity and strength of presentation kept me more engaged than I probably should be admitting to. Certainly, it is a lot better than some of the games that I have played recently. It's a shame the First Class label was so short-lived, as if this was their maiden educational effort, who knows how good they could have got. Sadly, the Spectrum support was dwindling by 1992, and Gremlin were far more interested in the more lucrative console and 16-bit markets. Rather understandably, you can't fault them for that. Crash Magazine, they awarded Shoe People 84 degrees, stating that it was the perfect purchase for the youngsters, educational and fun to play. Sinclair User, they said that Shoe People is likely to be a delightful learning experience for 4 to 6 year olds. It brings them together with characters they already know and love, and combines this with very usable new national curriculum based learning material. Best of all, it's fun to look at, listen to and play. You can't ask for much more than that. They also gave it 84%. Your Sinclair went one better with an 85 degrees, stating that it was a big bundle of spanky educational software with a thick coating of cuddly fun. And well, I must say this has all come as a bit of a surprise to me. I was expecting a right old stinker, much like my fetid, repugnant, toxic plates of meat.
Where did I leave my Spectrum Plus 3? We spent too much time playing Renegade 3. It was lame, set it on fire. It was dreadful. Crash gave it a smash. What a bunch of dickheads. They also made a game based on this bloody scarf. And it wasn't that bad.
The Snowman by Raymond Briggs then. Do you know what lesson I learned from that? It taught me that if you make friends with people, that they will die. And this was proved to be correct. Time and time again, I have friends that have died. It also taught me that it was okay to travel with a man that I'd just met across international borders to meet with another load of much older men. Men in a ring. Yeah? You ever see what I mean? A ring in a different country. Yes, as a boy. Now I've finished corrupting a pan-generational festive treat, let's talk about the source material.
Originally a storybook released in 1978, Raymond Briggs's tale famously only featured beautiful pencil illustrations with no words at all. And it was a stark contrast to his previous effort, the slimy, disgusting ogre Fungus the Bogeyman. After scooping a series of awards including the prestigious Kate Greenaway Medal from the Library Association and the Lewis Carroll Shelf Award in America, TVC producer John Coates approached the fledgling Channel 4 with a storyboard, accompanied by a Howard Shore piano track. Channel 4 hadn't even begun broadcasting at this point in March 1982. Instead, they debuted in November with a programme called Countdown, which I may have talked about here recently. Channel 4 greenlit production for the animation to be shown on Boxing Day of that year. Director Diane Jackson, who'd previously worked on the Yellow Submarine film for the Beatles, worked tirelessly with her team to recreate the picture book style and make it look as authentic as possible, with pastels, crayons and other colouring tools drawn onto the celluloid traced over hand-drawn frames. The story was slightly expanded from the picture book, with the trip to the North Pole and Father Christmas not present in the original book, and of course they added the choral classic Walking in the Air, which I'm duty bound now to do what every smart ass does who talks about the Snowman and tell you that in fact was not sung by Aled Jones, but actually by forgotten uncredited chorister Peter Orty. I don't particularly blame Aled Jones for snatching that role for the single release, because all children are competitive bastards really, and Jones was as backstabbery as any multinational CEO. And you know what? It did him alright. He was on Songs of Praise for a bit, wasn't he? Fair play to him. What the film did was remain captivating despite not featuring any words, and it has remained a fixture on Channel 4's Xmas schedule ever since. That's nigh on 40 years, which is almost certainly before any of us developed pubic hair, despite all of us involved here with this video, both making and watching, being incredibly old. It won numerous accolades too, including a BAFTA and a placing at number 71 in a Best TV Programmes of All Time list, which was on Channel 4, mind. That's a suspect placing. The story was pretty simple. A small boy builds a snowman on a particularly flurry-filled day on the outskirts of Brighton, before coming down at midnight to find the compacted ice fella strutting around the garden. Then they muck about the house for a bit before he melts slightly and it gets a bit worrying. And then Thrusty the snow dude scoops up the little fella and flies about the coldest parts of the Arctic Sea, somehow without the kid dying of hypothermia. Then they come home, the boy gets into bed and he wakes up to find his new best friend is a big old dead puddle. Yes. It wasn't for another 3 decades that sad children who had grown up a little and found that real life is far, far worse than the death of a cartoon snowman finally found that the snowman had sort of Jesus powers and was back, and now he had brought a dog with him in the sequel The Snowman and the Snow Dog in 2012. And then he died again at the end of that. At least he gave him a dog. The game then. The Snowman was released by Quicksilver and developed by David Shear, who also was involved with the Spectrum ports of Golden Axe, Savage and the Thompson and Twins Adventure. Coming out in 1983 on the MSX, Commodore 64 and the Spectrum, The Snowman was a single-screen platformer that cribbed design elements from a couple of other major titles. Objects were collected and dropped like jetpack, creatures were avoided in a maze-like structure like Pac-Man, and overall the game had a Burger Time look to it. You are thrown into the slippers of the small boy. from the animation, sometimes called James by the way, and you must build and then maintain the snowman over the course of 4 levels. The first has you attempt to assemble the friendly frosty fella's body using clumps of snow scattered around this curiously barren like scaffold construct that makes up the levels. The level is populated by various disruptive shits that will do their best to get your mad up, stealing away your collected goods or making the boy plummet several stories to land awkwardly on his back in bed. That looks painful. Lose an item due to the aggressive nature of the snowman hating gits and it will appear randomly somewhere else on the playfield. The boy's hunger acts as a timer, so be sure to grab some of the festive foods that sporadically materialise throughout your Frankensteinian adventure. Other power-ups include an ice lolly that causes issues for one particular enemy type, whilst an alarm clock will fend off the heavy eyelids that are accelerated in their downfall by some soporific sleep monsters. Later levels will have you assembling the finer details of the snowman, such as his hat and nose, and then the boy must fend off the inevitable thawing of his tall, posh stalagmite buddy by collecting ice cubes, before the 4th level has you gathering toys and gifts for the glacial giant to play with. And suffice to say, actually I think this game's alright, actually. It's simple to get to grips with clear goals and a crisp early Spectrum graphical style that mimics an arcade machine that never was. It's a pure experience, pure as the driven snow. Is it challenging for children? Maybe a little bit. It's very enjoyable, but it's not without caveats. In order for your boy to move between the ice slides and the platforms, you have to precisely line up his slipper sole with the ice sheet, or he won't budge. And that has to be to the exact pixel. Do not even try and play this with a joystick. You must use the keyboard, otherwise you will get nowhere. With a timer and relentlessly patrolling enemies, this usually ends up in many a frustrating moment. Slipping off the edge also condemns you to bedtime, so watch your step, little fella. The lack of variety is also an issue. I've heard rumours that the game might mix up the levels layout a bit after you've played through the first 4, but I've seen no evidence of this, and I'm too lame at games for that to ever be something I can confirm. Also, the lack of a flight-based level, be it a horizontal or vertically scrolling one, seems like a massive oversight for a game based on the snowman. I mean, when you think about it, the animation's pivotal, most famous scene involves the protag struggling for oxygen in the upper echelons of the Earth's ozone firmament under the arm of his flying snowman friend. But you know what? I'm being very harsh on the game. It is okay. It's pretty good. I'm moaning for moaning's sake, as it is a solid arcade-style title and a pleasant surprise. Reviews were pretty glowing too. Sinclair user declared the game as attractive and a change from the violence of Space Invaders and the like. They gave it a cheeky wink and an 8 out of 10. Crash, in their 3rd issue, said that despite the control problems, the Snowman turns out to be a frustratingly addictive game. A 78 degrees was stuck on the Snowman like the carrot on his face. Wait a minute, it wasn't a carrot. Or was it? I can't remember. CMVG liked the game a lot, saying the graphics are great and it's very playable despite the control being quite difficult. An 8 out of 10 from them, then. And that is the Snowman. You know what? It's alright, but it's not as good as its sequel based on When the Wind Blows, which has you as a pair of naive old folk jumping around the nuclear-ravished wreckage of their house, trying to stave off radiation sickness with blind patriotism and hope which will never be fulfilled. And I will cover that next. Never, as a game didn't exist to that. Of course it didn't. I just like talking about When the Wind Blows, really. That's the Sooty Sweep game on the Spectrum playing there. It's really an excuse to play the theme music, because that's my sex music, that is. Yes, it's half a minute long, but that suits me, and it suits her, because she normally wants to get it done and leave by the time she finds out that I have the Sooty theme as my sex music. Sooty was a near-mute yellow hand puppet that initially made an appearance on a local TV talent show in 1952, with his lower aperture fully filled by the clasping fist of magician Harry Corbett. Sooty's cheeky nature and parlour tricks were a hit with the viewership, and they soon became regulars on the BBC show Saturday Special. To better stand out on the black and white televisions of the time, Corbett applied soot to the ears and the nose of Sooty to make him stand out, and that is how he got his distinctive moniker. Sooty was later joined by various other characters, the most successful of which were the irritating, squeaking, petulant beagle Sweep and the boring, moody fun killer Sue, a panda gifted with the power of human vocal cords and impressively well-spoken English diction. Sooty was eventually transferred to ITV in 1967, and Harry's son, Matthew, soon took over the Ursine manipulation in 1976. With Matthew in charge, the format changed to a weird sitcom where the puppets lived in a house, within a house, and we got to see more of their legs, and it's weird. And this scene in particular makes me feel creeped out, and I don't like it whatsoever. Just look at it. Sooty is still a fixture on ITV-B, with Matthew Corbett's son Richard Cadell now interfering with the yellow fella's undercarriage. With 850 episodes in the bag as of 2018, it is the second longest running children's show in the world, after Blue Peter, a show which hangs about despite no children I've ever met ever admitting to liking it. Alternative Software, that absolute budget license spewing machine, released a tie-in game based on Sooty in 1989. That game was Sooty Sweep. Sooty Sweep was developed by Enigma Variations, who are responsible for a clutch of games that we've already covered on this here channel if you want to watch them. Games such as Hong Kong Phooey, Wacky Races, the Official Father Christmas game, Count Duckula, and Gilbert Escape from Drill. And they developed versions of the game for all of the major computer formats of the time. Alternative and Enigma Variations also put out an educational title based on Sooty the following year called Sooty's Fun with Numbers. Sooty's Fun with Numbers used assets from the Sooty Sweep game. And no, I'm not going to play it because I'm very aware of playing a maths game set up for under 7s and showing myself up. If you would still like to see me playing a confusing edutainment title aimed at children, I did play Ormond Cheap recently and it simply ended up confusing me. There's a link up there for it. The 1989 Sooty Sweep game, though, it has the extraordinarily deep, complex and dramatic plot that you would expect for a creature that is from the same species as the animal that bummed Leonardo DiCaprio in that film, The Revenant. Do you remember that? He got bummed. I think he's supposed to be getting torn apart, but it looked like he was getting bummed. So the groundbreaking plot is that Matthew has gone out and he's left Sooty in charge of the house. And just to stop it there, now chronologically Sooty is around 30 to 40 at the time this came out. But isn't he a child in the Sootyverse canon? Isn't this incredibly irresponsible parenting? Or is this just like leaving your pets at home? I don't know. Anyway, unfortunately, Sweep has thrown bones all over the house and escorted a ton of creepy crawlies into the house from the garden. And so, rather than taking a punishment beating from the terrible parent Matthew Corbett, Sooty elects to help Sweep find all the bones in the house before Matthew returns. I'm not sure what they're planning to do with the creepy crawlies. The game doesn't seem to care, so we'll just ignore it. I will, however, say that I understand why Matthew would be annoyed to find bones all over the house. It's not like Sweep's just left them about, is it? To get them onto those high shelves, to get them in those high places, Sweep must have been lobbing them around to end up where they are. And who knows, perhaps Corbett is planning on bringing home a Tinder date. And let me tell you, it's very hard to explain to dates why you have carcass remains all over your house, more so than when you play the Sooty theme, when you're planning to, and how do we put this, put fist into glove puppet. No wonder there's a bottle of Jack Daniels in the loft for Corbett to drink when Sweep's behaviour becomes too much. He's not right, is he? Corbett's house, where the creatures reside, is a fairly sizable upper middle class dwelling from the look of this game. As you know what, he's got 16 rooms and one of them is a larder, a room type that most of us haven't seen unless we've gawped our way around some old National Trust ancestral dust gathering home. You can play as Sooty or Sweep, and you must collect bones in each room and hand them to Sue, who just sits there on her arse waiting for you to give her the bones, because she gets preferential treatment and won't get beaten because she's a speaking panda, and there's money to be made from that. Probably. I'm sort of inventing my own canon now, and as there's been 50 years of it, perhaps I should just shut up. You can either play as Sooty or Sweep, and both if you have a friend, but if you do, why are you making them play Sooty and Sweep games on a ZX Spectrum? They only wanted to have a cup of tea and talk about their other half's colon operation. What are you doing? This 2-player mode is competitive cleaning, as the pair compete for the highest score. Competitive cleaning, that sounds like it's Sue's idea. Sue is smart. Sooty can fend off the snails and bugs with dark magic, which he potentially has sold his little bear soul for. Sweep uses water, which is something you can get from the tap, soul intact and left untouched by the ancient ones that rule above us and will one day rise again. Sooty and Sweep is a flip screen collect 'em up then, with the option of an easy or hard mode. Easy mode means infinite health, though you still have to contend with the relentless passage of time that leads to the incoming wrath of Corbett's bone rage, and also less bones for you to collect. As I want in my life, hassle-free while searching the home for these bones, I'll put it on easy. So what do we get for our £2.99 investment? You get a fairly generic Enigma Variations platformer, that's what. While the house is large, it's not got the scale of a Jet Set Willy, there's no need for a map. You can jump around fairly simply, and the 10-minute time limit is plenty of time to collect all of them bones. What I've found will scupper you on your first playthrough, and I'm pretty sure most people get this scuppering, is that the pint-size pair have a Dalek-like aversion to stairways. You spend ages trying to leap up some twixt-floor preambulatory platforms to no avail. Up, diagonally up, jumping, no control seems to work. Nothing works. In the end, you have to give it a rest and go and have a look for what the solution is. And instead of pressing up to go upstairs, you press down. To interact with stairs, you press down no matter what direction. So you press down to go up. What a pig of a control design decision. Get it all done and you get a generic well done message, and Matthew won't stomp an additional hole in your fluffy ass. I'm sorry if I've built up the idea that Matthew Corbett abuses children and animals. He doesn't. I have nothing to back that up. I hope this doesn't end up in the hands of his lawyers. He was a dear, sweet man, and his son is doing tremendous work, I assume. Sooty and Sweep is a pretty standard budget fare. No better or worse than the myriad other titles on the W.H. Smith cassette shelf of the time. I've played it and I'll probably forget about it until I do a final ranking video of all the TV show Spectrum tie-ins. at the end of this process, which is still some way off. As far as I can find, only Your Sinclair reviewed it, and they stated that the Sooty Sweep game is so repetitive and weak that you really won't give a monkey's. Great license, shame about the game, and they gave it a 49 degrees. I think they're being slightly harsh there. It wasn't brilliant, but it's not that bad either. Developer Clockwise were commissioned by Alternative to work on a Sooty and Sweep 2, but a dispute between the two companies meant the completed game never appeared. Co-programmer Dean Hickinbottom said the ZX Spectrum version was ported to the Amstrad CPC. There were also Commodore 64 and Atari versions. The game was never released due to a dispute between Alternative and Clockwise. I've already said that, Dean. And that there then is another Spectrum game done that was based on a TV show. Izzy Wizzy, let's get busy. Tap, tap, to tap, 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 tap. Super Gran is a North East England based children's comedy that ran from 1985 to 1987 that is probably most famous for having a theme tune sung by Billy Connolly, the comedian who had a face like most dogs owned by old people. In the song, Billy informs us that Super Gran is more than a match for the characters from both the DC and Marvel universe, which makes her a prime candidate for being the chief villain in Avengers 7. It's very much a product of its time, but it's good, innocent fun with some very tricky to understand Geordie accents for us weak southern fairies to translate. The first of two Spectrum games based on the series puts you in the Tam O'Shanter of the titular geriatric powerhouse. The first level, or sheet, quite an accurate description that, sees you pilot Gran's flying cycle in a dogfight to the death against a load of other people on flying bikes that would have looked absolutely mental if it happened in real life. Its simplistic action once again almost completely ruined by a batshit crazy control system that sees you fire in whichever direction you're pointing the joystick in. This would be fine if the enemy and player sprites didn't take up nearly an eighth of the play area each. As it stands, it's near impossible to take down the horde of cycle-bound aggressors without careening into them or a stray bullet before getting a bolt off in their general direction, especially when you're as completely devoid of skill as I am. I wanted to see the next sheet, so I kept on trying. And here is sheet 2. You press space and let go of space. So the sequel to Super Gran is Super Gran The Adventure, and it is surprisingly a lot better than the arcade game, which was covered in episode 3. It was programmed by Brian Harworth from Adventure International, who worked on the Quest Probe Marvel games. Trust me, Tynesoft are better when they publish games rather when they program them themselves. Auf Wiedersehen, pet. The lexicon is a wee bit fiddly at times, but the adventure is reasonably fun with a well-paced plot. Scunner Campbell gets one over on dear old Gudrun Ure at the start, and soon Gran is building her strength up in hospital with porridge because she's Scottish, and as we all know, Scottish people just eat that, the stomachs of animals, and drink orange pond water soaked in iron girders, and don't you try and deny it. The puzzles are decent, they make reasonable sense, and it doesn't look too offensive, does it? It's a good looking adventure game. It's a step up, certainly, from those unofficial games I covered in episode 98. Just the one review for Super Gran The Adventure, this time from CMVG, who gave it a 7 out of 10 and said, after a shaky start, it is enjoyable to play. I love the way she says that last SuperTed. SuperTed! It's like she's in a hurry to get home and has just remembered. Anyway, SuperTed was an animated show produced for S4C and based on an original story idea by a guy called Mike Young, who wrote it for his young child in 1978 as a way to help him conquer his fear of the dark. It ran from 1986 until... what the hell just happened on screen? Did he just rip off his own skin? That's not right. I've got to say that has left me very troubled indeed. I mean, how many layers are there? Does he change from standard Ted to SuperTed by continuing to remove layers like some sort of plush-friendly onion? How many does he have to go for before he starts to rip his skin off, and then just one day he gets to like nothing? He just erupts into like a fluffy teddy bear lump. It's messed up, I tell you. It is messed up. You can't go around just ripping your skin off every time you want a superhero about. The original SuperTed ran from 1983 to 1986 and featured the voice talents of Derek Griffiths, John Pertwee, Roy Kinnear and Mervyn Hughes. After a hiatus of 3 to 4 years, the show was recommissioned as the further adventures of SuperTed and was an American-produced show, which I didn't know. And actually featured in the Hanna-Barbera hour that they had over there. So there's a link to the previous episode. It's not like I come up with these on the fly or anything. In terms of plot, a discarded teddy bear lucks out twice. First, Ted has an extraterrestrial covered with spots called, Spotty, bring him to life by sprinkling a magic substance all over his face. Just like that man in the park when I was a kid. I never got superpowers. Must go back and ask him why. Secondly, he flies off to Mother Nature. Not the same as Mother Nature out of Captain Planet, although it did seem to be like an early 90s thing that Mother Nature would do stuff for you. Anyway, she decides, I don't know, for shits and giggles, just to give SuperTed superpowers. What a day that is. First you gain sentience and then you're given superpowers. I've been alive for 40 years. No one has yet given me superpowers. Still, as Uncle Ben famously said to SuperTed, I think it was him anyway, with great power comes great responsibility, and he's tasked with stopping the criminal naughtiness of an obese, apparently troubled special needs guy called Bulk, a dude cosplaying Red Dead Redemption, and a sentient camp skeleton whose origin is never explained. As for the games, well, they were released 6 years apart by 2 different publishers. The first of which, SuperTed, was released by the Longman Group Limited. Longman Software were an education software house who sometimes dabbled in the odd arcade title for the under-10s. And SuperTed was one such title. SuperTed has to capture the 3 villains and put them behind bars before they blow the jiggery pokery out of everything with bombs. They're running around a 9-screen maze covered with various things that would cause the said maze to fail numerous risk assessments should a health and safety officer visit. Hit any of the flashing objects and SuperTed loses his abilities and reverts to being standard Ted, who might be the slowest main protagonist in any game I've ever played. Look at this guy, I've not slowed down the footage. More importantly, Skeleton, Bulk and Pete refuse to be arrested by a capeless teddy bear, and so will just peace out on him if they catch sight of him. Luckily, Ted can be repowered by hurling himself at blancmanges, which I can confirm doesn't work and also has a strong chance of upsetting your mum or wife or whoever made the said blancmange. Dawdle in your enemy acquisition for too long and the hoodlums will just find a way to put leather to pavement and escape from jail. If you fail to capture them, well, it looks like this. Basically, it looks like your Spectrum has just died. Make no mistake, this initial SuperTed title is as rudimental as they come. The graphics are as pre-1985 as graphics can possibly ever be. The sprite work is decidedly basic and the animation is, well, non-existent. In standard form, Ted's sprite doesn't even flip. He just sort of moonwalks. Chick chick chamona. It's not aged well, in all honesty, from a gameplay perspective either. SuperTed is very slow and his standard form is eyelash-tearingly sluggish. The title is so old, I can't even provide you with a review from the magazines of the time. The second game, SuperTed The Search for Spot, starts off amazingly well. What a banger! Listen to that. SuperTed Search for Spot, see what they did there, Star Trek 3 in it, was programmed by Damien Scattergood for Enigma variations for the Alternative Software Company. Alternative Software, like High-Tech in the last episode, were keen to prize £3 out of the wallets of children with their budget range of titles and re-releases based on popular children's television properties like Huxley Pig, Popeye, Trapdoor, Sooty Sweep, Thomas the Tank Engine, and Gilbert the Alien, and Jaws apparently. SuperTed's Search for Spot is colourful. It's one of those exuberantly coloured Spectrum games that just wants you to know that it's owned the Spectrum's limitations. Colour clash be damned, it's out and it's proud. SuperTed must rescue poor old Spotty, who has been captured by Texas Pete. Quite how Spotty manages to talk to Ted at the bottom of the screen when he's been kidnapped isn't clear. Maybe he's just really loud, or Ted has some hitherto unheard of super hearing or something. The side-scrolling title plays a lot like the arcade Superman by Taito, primarily as SuperTed doesn't shoot anyone, but instead punches everything with a bit of a feeble range. Wouldn't that be a bit like being hit in a pillow fight if you were hit by a teddy bear? Battle various wildlife, missiles and criminals, and Spotty will finally be free. The game is pretty playable, I guess, though it is hamstrung a little by some very jerksome scrolling and a cumbersome control scheme. Is it better than the other SuperTed game? Yeah, I'd say so. It's aged a little better thanks to that 6-year advantage for sure. Your Sinclair gave the game a 62%, saying it was competently programmed, fun to play, but reckoned it had a few niggles and was a bit hard, which I agree with, it is, but I am pretty lame at video games. And that's that for another week. Keep an eye out for any of those loose SuperTed skins if you're not too creeped out like I am. You could always sell them as cute outfits for toddlers, couldn't you? Ah, that would be nice. Wowee! Vector graphics, a great way to represent 3D environments on ancient technology. But just stop and imagine though, if real life was all in these graphics. What if your mum was untextured geometric frames? Don't tell Charlie Brooker, it'll be in the next series of Black Mirror, and then I'll watch it and never sleep again. I like sleep. Let me sleep. One day, just for a while, without the guilt. Anyway, Terrahawks, yeah. Terrahawks was a 1980s sci-fi show that was the last Jerry Anderson series to feature his creepy human-handed puppets. Set in the futuristic year of 2020, ooh, that's soon if you're watching this in 2019, or if you're not, ooh, that's right now if you're watching this in 2020, and ooh, that's happened really recently if you're watching this in 2021, or ooh, that was ages ago and it didn't happen if you're watching this anytime after that. And if you are, why? You know, there's newer YouTube videos you could be watching. that have got better production values, and if you're watching it quite far in the future, maybe you should be looking at holograms instead. Anyway, it followed the adventures of the eponymous Terrahawks, a task force responsible for protecting Earth from invasion by a group of space aliens and sinister galactic androids. Just look at this lineup of warriors, galactic warriors here, the Terrahawks. You've got John Craven from Newsround, a sexy Jennifer Saunders, a youthful Jim Davidson, a tanned version of Vera Duckworth from Corrie, and Rose West. There's Rose West. Can I put this in? Is this going too far? No, it's fine. They're helped by the Zeroids, robotic assault footballs with lame TV 1980s sci-fi designs, one of which is voiced by Windsor Davis, the world's most terrifying Welshman. They're all at odds with the rotten sods such as Zelda. Not that one. No, she's fine. It's this one. Ugh, look at her. She's a right uggo. She looks like she smells funny and has more cat food in her house than human food. I'm going to be frank, I don't trust her. Look at her. And I'm right not to, because she has an army of very unimaginatively named things called cubes. Now these things, they're the evil counterparts, of course, of the Zeroids. She should have called them the Hemorrhoids, because that's funny, unless you've got hemorrhoids and then you have trouble sitting down, and I apologise. She also has a horrible family and a bunch of really ugly monsters that look like God has forsaken their prettification day. While it wasn't as big a success as the evergreen perennial Thunderbirds, or even something like Captain Scarlet, Terrahawks was still another hit for Anderson's Super Mario Nation technique. A word that makes me instantly think of Super Mario, and it does you too, don't try to deny it. In August 2019, Anderson Entertainment Group announced that they were planning to revive the show with the forthcoming Kate Kestrel and the Terrahawks show. She was the one I unfavourably compared to Vera Duckworth earlier. But I take that back. She's cool, styled as she is, to look like candy floss. So, the game then. Published and developed by the CLR Group PLC in 1984. What a catchy name. To know more about CLR, they did a real mix of games with nothing particularly special, with the odd license like Oink Comic, and games based on Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds and the Rocky Horror Picture Show. The game itself, well, it's a space set shooter reminiscent of the old Atari Star Wars arcade title, specifically that bit on the surface of the Death Star with all the big towers shooting at you. The game involves you trying to pass the Terrahawk pilot training. That is the plotline of this game. To achieve this, you need to be able to survive flying around a black hole. Now, if you have a spaceship, which you probably haven't, that is capable of interstellar travel, please do not fly near any black holes. If you go beyond a certain point, they have this thing called the event horizon that will draw anything in inescapably, even light, and it will crush you, spaghettify you. You won't be coming back out of there. You will definitely die. Do not, as I say, fly near a black hole. Ignore Terrahawks. The Terrahawks are stupid puppets. Back to the game. So when you've actually been sucked into the black hole, you're tasked with flying right into the centre of the vortex. Don't worry, it'll take you there itself. Anyway, blasting the monoliths out of your way. Maybe the real test is actually not flying into a black hole, which, as I've covered, is a stupid idea. And the Terrahawks are just checking that you're not too much of a dim bulb to actually fly into a black hole. Anyway, let's ignore all these sciencey, nerdy things. So, anyway, you only get a limited amount of blaster bolts to take these big old towers down. They don't really shoot at you, they just get in the way. So make sure you evade some of those with some big sweeping, flying, skillful moves. Hit 5 of them and your shield will go and you'll be dead. Done. Now, obviously, there is the idea that maybe you could just fly above them, and that's not a bad idea, except that you use more fuel flying above them. You will not have enough fuel if you fly above them to reach your intended target. So stick to the ground and dart between those columns like a badass. It's very much Star Wars the arcade game crossed with 3D Death Chase when I think about it, but not really as good as either. There are two main issues here. There aren't any enemies. The towers don't shoot at you. Nothing happens at all. You just have to shoot at the towers themselves to get them out of your way. Each time you hit the tower, they shrink a bit, but that is the extent of what you can shoot at. The other issue appears to be when you move into the next section, it's more of the same but trickier. Sinclair User declared it a 5 out of 10 in their issue 32. Unlike most boys of the age of 3 to 7 across multiple generations, I never really liked Thomas the Tank Engine. One, because I think I'm a bit of a contrarian pig dog, but two, my curse of overthinking. Thomas and his mechanical friends terrify me. Not them themselves, but their existential predicament. These poor souls, gifted sentient thought, personalities and will, are trapped, limbless and confined onto a rail network, forced to work hard for their human paymasters. An allegory there for late-stage capitalism, perhaps. Be a good little engine, work hard, make your bosses richer. And all this written by a vicar of all things. The Reverend Wilbert Aubrey first started writing the Railway series in 1945, which would later be taken on by his son Christopher. The titular Thomas was the subject of the second book, and it soon became clear that he would be the star of all of the books. The core engine friendship group of Percy, Toby, Edward and James have been expanded upon over the years as the fictional island of Sodor has filled up with all sorts of befaced sentient vehicles serving its population. That's the story of Thomas the Tank Engine. In 1979, TV producer, writer and voice actress Britt Allcroft discovered the books and arranged a deal with the Aubreys for ITV to show a 26-episode run that eventually was shown in 1984. Ringo Starr, who is in some band or the other at some point previously, something about insects maybe? I don't know. Possibly? Well, he provided the narration for this early iteration of the show, which was shown in the US as Shining Time Station, with Starr replaced a bit into the show's run by the legendary comic George Carlin. Later Thomas series have changed animation style, format and narrators since then, and it's gone all CG now. It's all a bit creepy, and I won't be talking about that because that's after the games came out, and if you've got children, you're probably sick of Thomas the Tank Engine. But before we get on to the game, special shout out to the 2000 movie starring Alec Baldwin as the controller, mainly because I could do a joke about his recent appearance on the news, but now I don't have to. But if I did, the joke would be quite gunny. I mean funny. Too soon? There are two Thomas the Tank Engine games on the ZX Spectrum, but there were nearly three. Alternative Software were the distributor of the Thomas the Tank Engine games. They sure loved a license, didn't they? And creator of Thomas the Tank Engine The Race, Dean Higginbottom, said that there was a game adaptation for the Spectrum, Amstrad, Atari 8-bit and Commodore 64 due, but a falling out between Alternative and Programmers Clockwise saw the two-player game cancelled mid-production. Thomas the Tank Engine The Race would have been the 1992 sequel to this, 1991's Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends. Created by the Orb and Enigma variations, who also did the Spectrum version of Defenders of the Earth and the colourful Turrican, Thomas was a pocket money price release for the Atari ST, the Amiga, the Amstrad, the Commodore 64, MS-DOS and of course what we're looking at now with our eyes, the ZX Spectrum. You are placed in the steel wheels of the grey fizzled choo-choo, and it's up to you to make your way from left to right. Charged by his obese slave owner to do a variety of tasks that mainly involve going across the screen, getting a carriage and then carrying on. You manoeuvre across the playfield using the tracks, with some inevitably taking you down some dead ends, which you'll have to track back on. Also on the rails are these reckless other trains that zoop about with gay abandon, although, to be fair, the signal operator should be at fault here, and he must be lying drunk surrounded by vodka bottles, the amount of stray trains there are wandering about, doing all sorts of things. The potential for a Potter's Bar disaster is huge and regularly happens in this game. It's gross negligence, I tell you. The two difficulty levels are easy and normal, and well, easy is pretty accurate and normal is not. Normal is a nightmare. You will coast the 6 stages on easy with the speed of a Japanese bullet train. You will have finished the entire game in less than 10 minutes, and well, I don't think that's not even worth the £3 that you've spent on it in W.H. Smith's, is it? I'm playing it on an emulator and I feel shortchanged here. The other trains are a bit of a bother still, but they won't represent too much of a challenge. You just have to look out for them and the odd break in a bridge. Normal mode is a passport to a derailment disaster zone, however. Not only do speeding trains appear out of nowhere and seem to chase you down at times, but a host of other obstacles, such as rocks, are carelessly left on the track with no way of getting around them at times. Some rapscallion from the local council estate must have thrown them on the track. Also, if you go too fast round a corner, you'll career off of it and you'll be put back 2 screens. And you can't be too late either, because we've seen from Octavius's review on this game what happens to trains when they misbehave on Sodor. They get bloody bricked up in a tunnel. Yeek. So is it any good? Well, you couldn't really put a train in a platformer, could you? So, given the limitations of the lead character, I struggle to think what else they could do with an action game. So it's a commendable effort, I suppose. But the game is not all that good, in all honesty. There's just not a lot to do in it. It looks dull. Normal mode is impossible. Easy mode is way too easy. And the only thing it's got really going for it is this kind of shrill, jaunty representation of the classic theme, which plays along with Thomas the Tank Engine zipping about like a ping pong ball fired out of a Japanese prostitute with the velocity of a cannon. Rich said this of Thomas the Tank Engine in issue 68 of Your Sinclair. Possibly one of the only budget games which is equally entertaining regardless of whether you load it up or not. That's a pithy review, isn't it? He gave it a 32 degrees. That's about right, to be honest. Thomas the Tank Engine Fun with Words was released on the Friendly Learning label, a subsidiary of Alternative. It was also programmed by Enigma Variations, just as was the first game. The Friendly Learning label, you might remember, also had games that I've already covered based on Playdays and Sooty. You can probably find a link to one of them up there somewhere in the ether above my words. So yes, Thomas the Tank Engine's Fun with Words, they're trying to make us learn again the beasts. Your little un, or you if you drink in a flat roof pub, will no doubt be helped by Fun with Words if you struggle with spelling 3-letter words. There are 6 games here. Spell Picture, where an image is displayed in the Spectrum's, I guess it's close enough, limited graphics, and you have to spell what that represents. The next game on the list is What's Wrong? And rather than being the 48K asking about your mental health, there's a misspelling in a word and you must pick out which letter it is and damn well replace it with the correct letter. Mix and Match has 5 words all mixed up. By using the picture as a guide, you have to select the correct letter for each of those words. Mix and match well, or that tunnel will await you. That foreboding tunnel. Letter Fun. Fun is a bit of a misnomer unless you like moving sentient trains to a shed with appropriate vowels on them. Do you? Is that a thing you like doing? Look, this is the game for you, you little vow-shedded twat. Lively Letters sees Thomas present a letter for you to fill a big old gap in a word, and you'll be judged by the fat controller. Is he correct with his letter? No, usually not. I would say Thomas is a bit thick, but do trains go to school as child trains? The final game is Letter Shapes, where you must place a letter on top of its similarly shaped brother, like you're breeding alphabets for a big old character farm. Give me some of that Q milk and a slice of tea from its flank. As with all these Spectrum Edutainment games, it feels more like an application than a game, so it's difficult to recommend playing it unless you're 4 or a blithering simpleton who tastes bus windows as a hobby. No reviews of this title exist in any of the magazines at the time, so this has broken the usual format for me. Thanks a lot, Thomas, you blue station hanging tunnel penetrating dildo. I no longer wish to think of you or your existentialist misery. I'm going to have a good day without you. Next. I was never much into Thunderbirds as a kid. Probably one of the very few that wasn't. I think it had something to do with the human hands. I think I just found that really weird. That said, I can totally admire its puppetry, or, as it said at the end, Super Mario Nation. That's probably why I didn't like it, because Super Mario Nation didn't turn out to be the sequel to Super Mario Land. Anyway, there were 2 games based on Thunderbirds that were on Sir Clive's little box of sparsely coloured wonders, and we're going to take a look at both of them today. So let's just see what all this puppet nonsense was about first, though. Debuting in 1965 for 2 series of marionette misadventures, Thunderbirds follows the heroic exploits of the International Rescue as they utilise a series of sea, land, space and air craft to rescue hapless scientists, adventurers, workers and the general public who appear to have got themselves in seemingly inescapable spots of bother. Created by husband and wife team Jerry and Sylvia Anderson, Thunderbirds was by far the most successful of the shows that came from the Anderson studio that gave us such puppet-led productions as Joe 90, Captain Scarlet, Stingray and later on Terrahawks. Despite its short 32-episode run, The Adventures of the Tracy Family and Friends was a huge success after its initial run, seeing regular reruns on British television, including a 1992 revival that saw the toys in such high demand that Blue Peter ran an episode that showed children how to make their very own Tracy Island, the base of the Thunderbirds, after the real ones had sold out in every toy shop. Mum, I want Tracy Island. You've got Tracy Island at home. Just be happy with your thing made out of, I don't know, bog rolls and stuff. Remakes, reboots and a 2004 live-action movie directed by none other than Commander Riker off of that there Star Trek followed, with the most recent series, Thunderbirds Are Go, coming in between 2015 and early 2020. Thunderbirds Are Go dumped the Super Mario Nation in favour of the cheap CGI kids production companies Love, with Fireman Sam, Thomas the Tank Engine Noddy and Postman Pat all being recipients of a lovely, spangly, soulless, cheaper to produce CGI coat of paint to wander around doing their good deeds in. Thunderbirds was inarguably a pan-generation phenomenon, but what of its 2 spin-off Spectrum games? The first game was published by Firebird Software in 1985. The story of the game sees a team of Egyptologists trapped within the cavernous tunnel network of a newly discovered pyramid. Newly discovered? Have you seen this game? You can fly Thunderbirds 1 and 2 freely about in it over many, many screens. It's huge. It must be the size of 14, Basildons or something. How can you not find this pyramid before now? Jesus. Anyway, they send a radio distress call out that is heeded by lonely spacebound swine John Tracy, he must smell, who picks up that message in his Thunderbird 5 space station and sets Thunderbirds 1 and 2 out to help. You start the game by planning the equipment you may need to carry in your payload, including bombs, weed killer, Thunderbird 4, and a whole host, a plethora if you like, of other items. The less you take, the less points you'll forfeit from your final score, but it'll make the game a lot harder. Once you're in the game itself, well, you can swap between the two Thunderbird vehicles with a tap of the fire button on most screens. The paths of the tomb are blocked by two brick types of the same colours as the ships. The green ones can only be pushed by Thunderbird 2, and the blue blocks can only be shifted by Thunderbird 1. Also, Thunderbird 2 is a chonky piece of equipment and cannot traverse some of the tighter tunnels, but it does have a lot of the equipment on board that you will need to succeed. This lends the game a superb puzzle conceit that really touches upon the very heart of the franchise itself. The Tracy brothers and other members of International Rescue helping each other using their different vehicles to succeed in a rescue mission. It's by far a better use of the source material than the Terrahawks game I reviewed a while back, which was clutching at straws when it came to utilising the show's stories or assets. In other words, it didn't at all. I don't know how anyone could tell that was a Terrahawks game apart from the clues on the loading screen. The inability to be able to swap the ships if they're on neighbouring screens is almost certainly a lazy piece of game design that helps the puzzle element succeed, as you can swap when on the same screen or two screens apart, but you can't when you're just a screen apart. In Universe, this makes very little sense, but because the head over heels character swapping gameplay elsewise works, you know what, I'm prepared to give it a pass. Certain screens allow you to make use of the equipment you carry, and it's a brain teaser at times. It's not a looker by any means either, but it's a serviceable, solid title that is worth a shot. Nothing too incredible, but a pretty good concept delivered, not quite as competently as it perhaps could have been. Crash Magazine gave it a 64%, stating that it's a good game for puzzle and logic problem enthusiasts. Your Sinclair criticised the game for not featuring its characters, but praised it for getting the rest of the aesthetic right. They gave it a 6 out of 10. Sinclair user loved it. They said that they hadn't enjoyed themselves so much for a long time, and figuring out the puzzles had got them hooked. 5 out of 5 from them. CMVG also had love for Firebirds Thunderbirds. Whew, that's an avian elemental mouthful, isn't it? They said if you just want to zap things, don't bother picking this up. If you like a challenge and have a few hours to spare, grab a copy now. Very addictive, long-lasting and fun. They gave it a 9 out of 10. Moving on now to Grand Slam Entertainment's Thunderbirds, which was released for all the major computer formats in 1989. The 48K and 128K modes are largely very similar, except for the 128K version has the plinky-plonky, jazzed-up rendition of the Thunderbirds march playing as you gallivant around the various game worlds. The game is a multi-load affair spread over 4 missions, and boy have they gone to town with the colour palette on this. Mission 1 sees Virgil deliver Alan and Brains to a mine where the two of them have to go and rescue a pair of canary-waving workers that have got themselves trapped. Brains and Alan must first take a wild stab in the dark to what equipment they're going to need to carry, and then they set out to try and rescue the pair of poor miners before their subterranean hole fills with a bit of the old H2O. You can swap between the pair and hopefully you'll find the correct equipment you need to solve the puzzles and rescue the miners. Next up is Subcrash, and it's all gone awry as a huge atomic submarine teeters on disaster as it threatens to blow up next to an underwater volcano. That's a predicament, isn't it? Alan and Gordon arrive in Thunderbird 4 to avert the disaster, as similar time-limited Dizzy-esque gameplay ensues. Lady Penelope and Parker are brought into the fray in Mission 3 as it's found that the submarine was nobbled by a mine, and it's up to the pair to bypass security in the Bank of England to uncover truth in a document that's been hidden inside a vault. Was that a bad sentence? Yes, milady. It's soon revealed by the pair that the Hood, the show's primary antagonist, is behind the threat, and it's up to Scott and Virgil to travel to Arizona, as that's where the hairless twerp is hiding, and he's got a plan to explode a 60 megaton bomb unless someone flips him a bucket load of cash. As well as the colourful sprite work, the representations of the show's bestringed stars move with an amusing puppetry-esque gait, which I think is a fantastic piece of presentation. It's more trial and error stuff again with the gameplay, as you could find yourself stumped if you don't equip the right equipment at the start or use the right character in the right scenario, and some of the puzzles are fiendishly difficult. That said, it is a polished release indeed, and another excellent use of the license. Crash gave it a crash smash and said that the intricate and accurate graphics let you relive your favourite exciting episodes. Your Sinclair also rated the game highly, awarding it an 85% and declaring that it is one of the best arcade adventures for a long time. Sinclair user weren't as convinced, conceding that while it was a nice looking game, the low action design makes the game a little bit iffy. Just 65% from them. CVG didn't like the trudging from room to room, which they thought got to be a bit of a bore. Yet they said it captures the spirit of the show well enough to make it worth any Thunderbird fans. WAD. I'm presuming they mean money there, not semen. A 73% was their mark for Thunderbirds by Grand Slam. So, all in all, two very reasonably good games. I would even say they might be FAB. But then, that would be a terrible joke, so I'll back away from that immediately. Trapdoor was a brilliant claymation kids show which ran on ITV from 1984 until 1986. It centred around the kitchen of a massive Gothic castle and the affable Burke, a lowly blue servant to the mysterious and almost certainly evil thing upstairs. Burke has a tendency to be a forgetful nincompoop and often opens the eponymous trapdoor, which usually releases a monster from the bowels of the castle. This tends to cause Burke all kinds of issues when it comes to doing his daily duties for the thing upstairs, who has a very short temper. This plot device lends itself very well indeed to the Spectrum game, an absolutely beautiful looking effort by Don Priestley for Piranha Games. You, as Burke, must prepare various meals for the thing upstairs, and are given a limited time frame to do them in, else it's game over and Burke is likely to be flattened with a rolling pin and put back in the Play-Doh pot from whence he came. Unfortunately, all of these involve the various kooky creeps from that ruddy trapdoor. What an excellent little character puzzle game this is. It's tough but fair, very pretty to look at for a Spectrum game, and unanimously well received at the time, and rightfully so. Sinclair user gave it 5 out of 5, Crash awarded it the old smash that we've talked about already, and your Sinclair gave it a 9 out of 10. Well deserved praise indeed. Don Priestley and his big sprites have returned with Trapdoor sequel called Through the Trapdoor. Guess what happens in this? Yes, Burke goes in to the trapdoor. Could you guess from that title? Oh, I bet you did. You're a canny young lad. Now, Burke is, but no one's Burke, but he wouldn't normally do this because it's full of complete dickheads and ghastly day-ruining monsters. But his pal, Boney, has been kidnapped, or rather skull-napped, by a headless skeleton and dragged into the trapdoor. Personally, I think that seems like a good match, but there you go. Maybe Boney was hoping for a romance with someone else, like a nice Jewish girl or a pig or a fridge. I don't know what skulls are into. It's a 2-character adventure, as at times you'll be playing as Drut, the very springy, leg-deficient spider. You can swap between Burke and Drut at will, and you'll need both Burke and Drut to combine their skills to liberate their chum from the hell pit. The graphics are very similar to the original, which is no bad thing, though it's no longer manoeuvrable in all directions, meaning it takes place on a 2D plane. Is it as good as Trapdoor 1? No, not really. Lining up Drut so he can leap up into the air with the greatest of ease is extremely clunky at times, because you have to get in exactly the right place. So you'll be doing a lot of left and right shuffling so that the springy spider can hit the right spot. And unfortunately, it shares the same sort of very slow responding controls from the first game. Now, while they didn't really affect the first game as much, because you didn't have like an energy bar to protect, they still can be a game ruining experience. Now, it's still a very good effort, and it's definitely the best game out of this clutch, with Super Gran the adventure game coming second. Crash said in their issue 47 that it was another superb adaptation of the TV series, though its appeal comes from its graphics more than its addictive gameplay. They gave it a 70%. Your Sinclair gave it an 8 out of 10 in their issue 25, saying it was a hard adventure with the Don Priestley signature all over it. Sounds a bit sexual. Sinclair user in their issue, this sounds sexual, 69, 69, eh? They gave it a 7 out of 10 and said that it was a worthy success. We all watched it in the 70s and 80s, didn't we? Good old Wombles, about the uterus of the great QPR Tottenham and Newcastle's 90s striker Les Ferdinand. Who'd have thought they could make a TV show about that? 70s kids television sure was strange. They cared for the environment very much like Greta Thunberg, only Legion, covered in fluff and named individually after different geographical places. Written as a series of children's books in 1968 by author Elizabeth Beresford, they really grasped the nettle of national popularity when their tales were adapted into a BBC commissioned stop-motion animation children's show in 1973. Narrated by the nation's favourite friendly TV grandad Bernard Cribbin, 60 episodes of The Wombles were produced over 2 years, with a movie in 1977, a couple of specials released in the early 90s due to the enduring popularity of the creatures, and a remake show made by Canadian studio Cinar Films appearing in 1996. Such was the popularity of the mangy-looking garbage hoarders, they even had a novelty pop group. They appeared on Top of the Pops by growing to human size, and they'd sing songs. And if they can change size like that, just how big can they get? Could they become as big as Godzilla? And are they turning trash into weapons to use against humans? Are they going to overthrow us? Should we be worried? Because I sure am. Someone put them on a government watch list. I don't trust them. Oh yeah, the songs were performed by producer and songwriter Mike Batt, who wrote songs for people like Elkie Brooks, Katie Melua and Steel Eye Span, if we want to get back to facts temporarily. Getting back away from facts temporarily, the Wombles' popularity has waned since the new millennium, with the Wombles now only getting mentions generally now as one half of a once amusing portmanteau insult, which is now only trotted out by increasingly witless galoots who don't understand that jokes like that only have a very limited and finite lifespan. Still, with the world teetering on the edge of an irreparable ecological disaster with horrendous storms, awful flooding and poor old koalas burning to death, maybe there is scope for the Wombles to make a return in the 2020s, provided the puppets are made from recyclable materials. The Wombles computer game was a budget title released by Channel Regular's alternative software on the Amstrad CPC, the Commodore 64 and of course the good old ZX Spectrum in 1990. Developed by Enigma Variations, who again are the Channel Regulars responsible for previously covered Gilbert, Count Duckula and SuperTed The Search for Spot, among several other TV titles that we will inevitably get to. The Wombles is a flip-screen arcade adventure, putting the player in the hairy feet of Orinoco. Orinoco is pitted in a rubbish-clearing race against Pal Wellington at the behest of Tobermory and Great Uncle Bulgaria. This just shows how easy manipulated some people, and indeed Wombles, are. Go on, clear up all that junk, clear up all those food wrappers. It'll be fun, boys. No, it won't. I'm clearing up trash. This is other people's rubbish. This is awful. This is not fun. I too am easily manipulated, however, as I found it pretty fun, albeit very briefly. Orinoco must exit his Wimbledon Common burrow and gather all manner of chip wrappers, Coke cans and those polystyrene McDonald's burger boxes, which I'm all of a sudden feeling really nostalgic for, even though that's completely going against the spirit of the game. Those things were horrible and probably killed seals with their bare hands. Get your mind back on the world's health and the future of children, J as man-child. They cannot lose the ownership of the planet to the cockroaches, or indeed the cockwombles. You would be wise to make sure that you find a bin to throw the refuse in before Wellington mugs you of the precious garbage in your possession, else he'll claim the credit and half your total points, which seems a bit extreme, the insufferable little turd. You can catch up with Wellington and jab the woolly twerp in the kidneys with your elbow to claim them back. However, you don't literally do this. There's no bullying in the Wombles game, as far as I can tell. This aspect of the game seems a bit off, if you ask me. Aren't Wombles well known for their recycling? Why aren't they taking the rubbish home and creating wonderful things from it? And even if there's nothing of use, Orinoco gives not even one Womble arse cable about separating his cardboard from his aluminium cans. Look at this planet-hating bastard. At times you'll get requests from Tobermory to retrieve items from the common. These range from televisions to portable stereos to oil cans. Two things: who is leaving televisions in London parks, and if Tobermory knows there's a television in the London park, then there's a fair chance he knows exactly where it is and he should go and get himself the lazy cone-faced git. Late in the game, and late is a rather grandiose term for a game that can be finished in less than 20 minutes, Great Uncle Bulgaria requests a copy of the Times. Possibly he needs this to do the crossword, or possibly to read about how well the Womble's most successful prodigal son, Boris Johnson, is doing up the road in the place with the black door. Finish the game and you almost certainly will, and everyone has cake, and well, that's a fine end indeed, I'm sure we can all agree. Unless, of course, it's terrible cake, and when it's home-baked by a weird rodent with a penchant for hoarding rubbish, in all likelihood, you better hope that Bulgaria's put his hand in his pocket and gotten a pack of Mr. Kipling almond slices. Otherwise, you'll end up with something that will give you the riggedy splits. The graphics are finely detailed and monochrome, represented in bleak black and cyan, a colour scheme that makes me feel profoundly depressed, like I had a childhood in somewhere like Slough or even Stoke. It's also incredibly easy to lose sight of Tobermory's requests in the cyan joy abyss of Wimbledon Common. The theme on the title screen is unadulterated ear canal savagery and should be skipped past faster than a paedophile's van. As previously stated, the game is pretty easy, and in truth it's a very budget game to be played once and then forgotten about. If you have a dalliance with Orinoco the Womble, it will be a brief one, as he doesn't have much substance, you see. Yes, I am trying to really force an allegory about having a one-night stand with a Womble, and I'll leave it there, as I don't want to be talking about Womblecock or cock Wombles. I'm trying to bring new life into the portmanteau, but I'm failing, and so I should. Your Sinclair gave it a corner of a page as a review, and no one else did, which shows just how major a release Wombles was. I didn't even know of his existence until David Birdsall made me aware of it with one of his videos. Anyway, Your Sinclair gave it a 63 degrees, because they did that weird scoring thing for a bit, and said it hasn't got enough going for it to deter you from buying one of the other far better budget games around instead. And they're probably right. Maybe you could buy it, play it, finish it, and then record a better game on the tape. That's recycling. The Wombles will probably approve. I don't know where they stand with piracy. I'm sure they're okay.
And that's it. That's all of them. You can go now if you like. So yeah, if you've watched all of that in a row, I mean the first part and the second part in a row, that's a lot of time. I must apologise to you and your family. But yeah, thanks for doing so. And maybe there'll be another compilation before the end of December. We shall see. Anyway, like, subscribe, and Kay, thanks. Bye.